The tragic death of Christopher Stevens, our ambassador in Libya, which was so horrible and tragic, and the other 3 embassy staff that were killed, that was a horrible act. It was not an act of Muslims, of Islam against America. It was not an act of the Libyan government against America. We need to understand that that was an act of a very small, very militant, very fundamentalist faction that's seeking to gain political legitimacy. We need to understand this correctly. This is not primarily about Islam. It seems like it, right? Because it was the Prophet Mohammed that was derided, and people are upset about that, about the deriding the Prophet. Here's what's really going on. This has to be seen in the context of the history of colonialism. This has to be seen in the context of the political unrest that's happening in the wake of the Arab Spring. And this has to be seen in the context of the huge unemployment that you have in the region, the economic devastation. If you were to take those 3 factors, anger at a colonial history, terrible economy, and political unrest, and combine them anywhere in the world, regardless of what the major faith was in that region, you'd see the very same things happening that you see in the Middle East right now. Those are the common denominators, not Islam. Islam happens to be the religion that is tied to this region, and so it gets confused with the issue. But this is really not about Islam. Now, here's the proof for that. We have over 7 million Muslims here, Muslim Americans, good citizens of the United States of America, working with us, integrated in society, and they're not the least bit, I'm sure they're upset by seeing the Prophet Muhammad derided like this. It's awful. I'm upset by it, and I'm not Muslim. But we don't see protests, we don't see the same anger. Why? Because the economic situation, even as bad as the recession has been, is nothing compared to the economic devastation of North Africa, because we have a stable political climate here in the US. The vast majority of Muslims are not protesting violently about this at all. But that's not compelling to the media. The Salafi see themselves as the one that will liberate the region from Western influence. So they're angry with American foreign policy and with Western foreign policy. They also see themselves as the ones who will call Muslims back to a pure practice of Islam and stem the tide of this, what they see as being moral corruption, entering society from Western media and from Western influence. So the main question then is, what's the way forward? How do faith groups better understand each other? How do we, as American citizens, better understand what's happening? And the answer to that is dialogue. It is dialogue. I know some people say dialogue, what's the point of dialogue? That's just talking. Just talking is about the most radical thing that we can be doing. Gaining deeper understanding is what will defuse this whole situation. It's what will bring this situation, both sides of a divide, to a deeper understanding, to dissolve the conflict. One of the most progressive churches in New York City, the Middle Collegiate Church, is having Hussein Rashid, a very well-known Muslim scholar, come to speak, and he'll be delivering the message. So this is an ongoing effort to educate congregations, Christians and Muslims and Jews, about each other's faith.
In Christianity, obviously, we look to the compassionate action and teachings of Christ as our guide, and that's always a path of solidarity with those who everyone else is considered to be outsiders.
Anytime we seek to create a culture of inclusion, a culture of welcoming, a culture of compassion, it has to be with that small group of truly committed individuals who will invest that time and energy to then make their 5 friends part of that culture. It will always have to be a ripple effect.
I think every religious leader, every rabbi, every imam, every Catholic priest, every Protestant minister needs themselves as a leader to be reaching out to the other faith groups and dialoguing as leaders and inviting each other to their religious ceremonies, doing pulpit swaps, doing exchanges, and modeling for their congregation members how this is done. So by bringing people together who may not otherwise have the chance to connect. We have this great opportunity in the United States to be mixing with each other all the time. But that's not true in other parts of the world. It's not as easy for a Salafi Muslim from Pakistan or from Libya to be finding situations of religious pluralism to engage in. That's what our religious leaders need to be doing, but we need to give the most conservative, the most particularist, the most radical leaders, we need to seek them out, and we need to provide them with an education of religious pluralism. Muslims, Jews, and Christians within the Abrahamic traditions, all of them have an ethic, scriptural mandate to be at peace with the other. We can be demonstrating for the world how this works, how people of great difference can come together and be at peace with each other. It's not a hard case to make within Islam. Islam already supports the idea of religious pluralism in some ways more than Judaism and Christianity. It's built into Islam. The biggest effort of interfaith work today started after 9/11, and it was the initiative of Muslims who got together under the leadership of Prince Ghazi of Jordan, and they wrote a letter called The Common Word Between Us and You. And the letter was signed by about 300 heads of state of Muslim majority nations, grand muftis, ministers of religious affairs, and Islamic scholars, essentially saying, our texts agree. Our texts are similar in some ways, in that both Mohammed and Jesus call for the love of God and the love of neighbor. And so on that foundation, let's be at peace with each other. Let's reconcile. Come to understand us. Let's come to understand each other better. That effort is really the single largest gesture coming from Muslims for interfaith reconciliation.